We Need Each Other is a podcast about the importance of human interaction. It provides reminders that we are not intended to live in isolation. Human beings need each other. The things about another that pisses you off and the things that take you over the moon are all opportunities to see through another's eyes, recognize their intrinsic value, and then look more deeply within ourselves to find the love that's always there. So our first episode of We Need Each Other for 2021. We've been on a little holiday break, and I'm so glad to come back with this topic with this interesting individual. So let me tell you a little bit about Kalia Waite-Smith. She is a communications and organizational change/culture professional with over 10 years of experience in technology and education industries. She uses her lifelong love of stories and storytelling to help leaders craft stories, content, and experiences that inspire, inform, and involve employees on the journey towards strategic change. A SoCal native, she holds a BA from UCLA and an MBA from Cornell University. She currently lives in the Bay Area with her husband and an extensive collection of plants. Kalia, welcome to We Need Each Other. I am so happy to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me. Hello.
Yeah, it's been a while. Kalia and I have been together for a few years, 3-ish something. How long have you been in the Bay Area?
I've been here for a little over 2 years.
Yeah, so maybe 3 years ago we met, and she's an amazing individual that I miss dearly.
You're an amazing individual.
So, Kalia, you have a very interesting background, which is the reason that I was really excited that you came to mind for me to have you on this episode to talk about your background and how that affects you today in the climate that we're living in. So will you share a little bit of your upbringing with the listeners?
Yes. So I, like the bio said, I'm from Southern California. My mother is as well. She grew up in San Diego. She's a white lady. So I always say she's a white lady from My dad is a Black man from Trinidad. And so, they were married in the 70s in Boston. That's how they met. And, but they divorced when I was like 4 years old. So I actually was raised by my mother, me and my sister, older sister, who's 2 years older than me. And we were exclusively raised by my mother. And we really only saw our dad in the summer times and during Christmas. And he lived in Michigan. So we kind of split our time between mostly our, being raised by our white mother in predominantly Black neighborhoods. That's where we lived. And then with my dad, who's, a Black man, but he lived in Michigan in predominantly white neighborhoods.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's Michigan. I don't know. I know so little about Michigan, but I just it's a very white place. It's not as diverse as Southern California, where I was raised. And it's interesting because my mother is, at the time when she married my dad, but people weren't really marrying outside of their race. So
what year might that have been? I'm just curious.
It was 79.
79. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So it was the late 70s. So, it wasn't like it was happening in the 50s, but it wasn't as common as it is today. But she has always been she's an activist. This, Black Lives Matter and, anti-racism movement. She actually was part of a really big anti-racism movement in Philadelphia in the 70s and 80s. So for her, I actually grew up around this language a lot because of my white mother. Not because
interesting, huh?
My Black father is actually, obviously he's a Black man living in America. He's also an immigrant, so there's that factor. Mm-hmm. Immigrant parents are a little bit different than parents who have lived here for generations. We never throw food out. Expiration, like listen, you're lucky you had a fridge. Refrigeration is the savior of all things. It's unless it's walking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But my mother was really the one who was, giving us the lay of the land and the vocabulary around what it means to be Black. Black girls, even though she's a white woman.
And she just gets it because she's been in that movement for a long time. Wow, that's interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And more so than I never talked about race with my dad until this summer.
Mm. What was that conversation like this summer?
I mean, he's not like a person who has, many deep conversations a lot of the time. So he just isn't, but it was just, a common understanding that, so my dad also, side note, my dad also remarried a Black woman. And so he ended up having 6 other children, which are boys, young men, my brothers. They're like, I want to say like 22 and 20, something like that. When you get that far away from age groups, you're just like, I don't know.
Yeah.
They're 16 years younger than me. But it was simple. It was just like, he's been fighting this fight forever. And
so he has definitely experienced racism in this country.
He immigrated to this country and he lived in DC in the late 60s, early 70s. So he's experienced a lot of racism in this country. But that was the time he actually even had admitted it to me, because we never really talked about it at all. But it was just nice to have like kind of like a common understanding with him. He's like, yeah, not much has changed. I try to, this is him talking, I try to tell my sons, my brothers, that, these cops, they just see you as Black men. Like they don't see anything else. So you need to.
I find it interesting because he has a daughter other than you, right?
He has 6 daughters.
He has 6 daughters. But he doesn't have that conversation with the daughters?
I don't have that kind of relationship with him. That's interesting. I don't know.
Because you said he said to his sons, he had these conversations. And it's interesting because oftentimes even Black men don't understand the devastation that Black women go through in society. There are talks that we need to have also, and we are also brutalized, obviously, as we've seen recently, by the police. We have those same concerns, but are they not having those conversations? But it's interesting. And do you have any idea why your mother happened to have had such a great understanding? Like, what was her background do you know?
So she was raised very conservatively Christian. And her parents divorced. Now, this was very taboo at the time, divorced in the 60s. And when she was 13, so like 1960, her parents got divorced. And, it devastated their whole family. My grandmother wasn't a person who just like, she didn't want to get divorced. She was like, my grandfather left her, but she didn't want to get divorced. She didn't want to be in that position. And my mom I think part of it was like this world that she had been brought up in that was like super Christian, super conservative, super like everything's nuclear and perfect. It was kind of like tossed into array, and she kind of started seeing the cracks in that like foundation, and that it wasn't worth it to try to live this lie just to fit in with what was deemed at the time societal norm.
Right.
So I think that's when she started asking herself these questions about, what do we accept? What is our culture? What should our culture be like? Who's missing in our culture? Also, her father was a Spanish teacher, and so they spent a lot of time in Mexico. She actually speaks fluent Spanish. Was raised like very much immersed in Mexican culture, and so I think that's kind of, San Diego at the time San Diego still is a pretty diverse place, a very heavily Mexican influenced. And so I think a combination of probably the divorce and seeing like, a lot of these rules and norms are just like ridiculous. And then also, already opening her eyes to different cultures and kind of an appreciation for different cultures and groups and seeing, that she didn't want to live this sheltered life, right? She wanted to keep exploring. And so I think that just opened her eyes. And so she left San Diego after college or during college and just started meeting new people and movement.
I think what I'm finding in I don't even want to say research because I'm not consciously researching, but because I am in the work that I am of helping to open white people's eyes and helping to have Black people recognize their value that was always there, I'm understanding that the white people who just naturally got it are people who really were involved with other cultures in some kind of way. When a white person just lives in a white person's world, their eyes don't tend to open up because they're not taught to open their eyes. But when they've delved for some reason into a different culture, there's an eye opening that is available to happen. And apparently your mother took that. So that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, definitely. I was just going to say, she definitely attributes her dad, even though, he wasn't really in her life after the divorce, but her love of cultures and different people and really she's like, everybody's the same. Like, we're not treated the same and our experiences aren't the same because of that. But
in essence,
race is a construct. We've made it up. And she started studying it and the history of race and eugenics and, also like a ferocious reader. Like she loves books and knowledge and information. And so if you mix all those things together, there's no way she could kind of keep her.
Yeah. Have you experienced racism, Kalia?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Tell us a little, like what?
And there's intersectionality. So
yes.
Which definitely plays a part in it. But anywhere, like, I've been called the N-word before, which is like the least of the issue. Personally.
Yes, right.
The N-word, it's so awful. It is awful, but like, it's the things that justify calling me that, those latent behaviors that actually impact my life and like the direction and my access to opportunities that have been much more hurtful. Impact. I've experienced a lot of discrimination at work over the years. There's like this whole history of my life where I like did not get a job and would always get to the last interview and people are like, oh, I love you. I think you're amazing. I can't hire you. I have to go with somebody else. And I was like, well, wait, I thought you said you loved me and I was amazing. And they're like, you are. Let me call a friend. Let me call a friend and see if they have any opportunities for you. And I was just like,
it's the words not spoken.
Why can't you just hire me? If you're willing to recommend, listen, it's an interview.
Right. Yes.
If you're willing to recommend me to a friend of yours in a completely different company, there's something here. And it's a barrier. And for a long time, I didn't actually look at that. I just actually internalized it. I was like, I'm just not good enough. Obviously, there's something wrong with me. I just can't. I'm missing the it factor or whatever for people to actually want to hire me.
Well, see, that's the danger of this system of racism because we do begin, and it's intended that way. We begin to take these things personally, like something's wrong with me, when it's really a racist system that's planting those seeds inside.
Yeah, definitely. One of my more recent experiences with work was 100% discrimination. And I went to HR and I told them that this person is giving me a poor performance review for something that is ridiculous. And there's obviously my boss at the time was a white man. And I felt so like it was, first of all, I am a high performer. So you heard my, that doesn't, I perform very, very well. I'm very ambitious. I'm very driven. I build great relationships. He basically told me I need improvement on building relationships. I was like, well, do how could you say that? And he was like, he referenced a couple of moments, actions with other white male colleagues where they were actually being really combative with me and not opening to me and not listening to me. And he was like, you weren't able to make headways with them. So, you need to work on that. I was like, I think there's like some extreme bias going on here. So I hope you're having the same conversations with them when you hear them talk to me that way.
Yeah. Two,
you're my manager, so you're supposed to be helping me and supporting me, not just waiting for the performance review and telling me like you did this wrong. I don't think, and I said this to him, I don't think you have any appreciation for how difficult it is for me to have conversations with older white men and actually be taken seriously. And now I'm for that. And I think that is illegal. And he was like, wow, I'm sorry you feel that way. And HR couldn't do anything about it at the time. And so I think for me, though, that's the thing that really stands out because it was, it's like my job. I take my career very, very seriously. And here was somebody who, because of their own bias and their own prejudice and their own discrimination against me, they were basically limiting me in my financial opportunities and my professional opportunities. And, I consider myself very lucky in the horrible, awful lottery of being Black in this country. Like I feel like I'm one of the luckier ones because I haven't had any really, I've heard my friends have had stories, just blow your hair back. It's awful. And yet, and still I sometimes think if I was a white woman named Kelly, where would I be in my career? I'd be so much further along because of the doors that would maybe naturally open or the benefits of the doubt that I would be given that I'm just not given in the way because of how I look. So.
So, I was going to ask you the question because of coming from biracial parents and, just your unique upbringing. I was curious as to whether you chose your choice personal is to identify as Black, or is it that you identify as Black because society identifies you as Black? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. It's actually a very interesting question. So, listen, I was raised by my mom. So also, because of that, I was only raised my family who I saw for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Well, they were all white people. My dad's family lived on the East Coast. And so when we're living in California, we only see my relatives who live in California. And it's my mom's relatives.
Yes, right.
Yes. So I identify with them. When I'm with them, I feel like there's no difference between us. It's just my grandma, she's an old white lady with white hair. So in theory, the time, honestly, growing up, most of the time, I didn't think about it that much. However, as a very small child, my mom made it very clear to us, you need to know that you're a Black person.
That's beautiful.
I don't think I ever really had a choice because I watched Eyes on the Prize as a 5-year-old. Now, not advised because I get nightmares, but that's how my mom is. She was like, Eyes on the Prize came out, I don't know, in 86. And I think I was 86. And she was like, all right, we're watching it. Let's I was like, I don't want to watch this. She's like, you have to watch it. So, and then we talk about it and what did you see? And what does that make you feel? And so I don't think there was a time where I got to make that choice because it happened so young. But, identity wise, of course I identify with my white relatives. Like I'm, because I was raised by a white lady.
Mm-hmm.
I am always acutely aware that regardless of, my uncle's white, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like none of these things matter. They don't care.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When I move through the world, they see a Black woman. And I need to be, regardless of how I feel on the inside,
Mm-hmm.
that's for me and that's personal. I need to be aware of what I'm facing in the rest of the world in order for me to be successful, in order for me to be safe. I mean, safety is a huge thing. I have to be smart, I can't go and storm the Capitol. I know better, like, sorry, that just happened. But, I need to be smart about these things.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit of both, I guess. Inside,
Mm-hmm.
I definitely feel connected. And a part of me is both my white family, they're Norwegian and Irish, but that's also Trinidadian, right? And then also just because I grew up as a Black person in America, just like American Black people, so it's a mix inside, but how the outside world experiences you is, you can't separate the two.
So your husband is white, yes?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Do you believe that he really understands the Black experience?
I think he understands it as much as he can.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he tries really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And he has said, though, to me, especially recently, that I realize I will never fully understand.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't. There's no way, because I haven't lived your life. And I, even latently, he experiences these privileges of white malehood that are so ingrained in how he moves through the world. He doesn't even notice them sometimes. I mean, he got a new job recently, and when they gave him the job offer, they gave him exactly what he asked for, upfront, exactly what he asked for. They're like, we don't want to play games with you, so we're giving you exactly what you asked for. Boom, boom, boom. And he was like, oh, wow. Should I negotiate? I was like, well, I don't know, because I have to negotiate. I have to negotiate all the time because they never give me what I want asked out of the gate. So I don't know. No, just say yes, I guess. I don't know. Because I don't know that world where there's no negotiation, right? Where there's just here you go, sir. Welcome to the party.
Right. Oh, that's a whole different world.
I mean, I've never lived in that. It looks really nice.
Yeah, it looks really, very inviting. Yeah.
That you don't have to fight with somebody to get paid what what you deserve. Anyway, so these things, so because of that, there are things he can never really understand what it's like to know that every time you walk into a room, you have to be aware that people are going to, undervalue you, and that you're going to have to fight really hard to be heard. He just can't ever understand what that feels like, because it's only something you can experience and know, that pit in your stomach, right? The here we go, right? He walks into a room, or a virtual room these days, and he's like,
Mm-hmm.
I got this. Who's going to say anything to me? And he's right.
So if the two of you walk in a room together, predominantly white room, is he aware? Is there, does he just step in as himself, or does he step in with an awareness that it's affecting you differently?
I would say for this summer, before Memorial Day, for George Floyd, I don't think he ever thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think once that happened, he started asking himself these questions a lot deeper and being a lot more aware of
Beautiful.
that experience for me. And also a lot less skeptical when I tell him things are happening, and I know it's because I'm a woman and I'm a Black woman. And so I think he's more attuned to it. Actually, it's really funny. So listen, some things are just outright blatant. Like you just have to like live, I don't know where, on another planet
to not see.
But we were looking for apartments once, and I was with him. I swear this woman didn't even see me there. And this is in Oakland, and I don't know if people know this, but Oakland is in the process or gone through extreme gentrification. And I mean, people want to say gentrification is all economic. I mean, listen, you can't, it's racial. It's racial. It's extremely racial.
Yeah.
I see it. I like to think I'm not one of the gentrifiers because I'm a Black person. And I was visiting Oakland before it was like this. But anyway, we went to a neighborhood to look at an apartment by a white lady. And she said, she was just showing us around. And so we asked, so we're like, what's the neighborhood like? Very common question you would ask, like, are people friendly? And she was like, well, it's a lot less Black than it used to be, if that's what you're asking me.
Wow.
And we were just like,
Did she realize you were Black?
I don't know. That was the weirdest thing to say. I think she didn't. This is sometimes I feel unseen.
Yeah.
I think focused on this, like he's very tall. He's the man also. So there's like this gender stereotypes, right? And he also more talkative than I am. I don't like to chat people up. But I'm like, we were like, okay, obviously we did not move into that building. I did not, for many reasons, but But
he heard it. He heard it. He recognized
it. And afterwards he was like, did you hear what I heard? I was like, I don't even know. I don't even want to start unpacking that, what she just said. Like, was she saying that like it's a good thing? Like, was she saying that? That's a selling point to you, right? This is what she was saying to you. Like, congratulations, it's less Black. And I'm like, but your wife, maybe, I don't know. It was the winter. So maybe I was really pale and she, for some reason, thought, like I said, I think sometimes people just don't even see me or don't. I mean, they talk to him. She was talking to only him.
The white male, yes.
Mm-hmm. So in any case, like that happened like 2 years ago when we first moved here. And I mean, just stopped the whole ruined our tracks. And I think that when you're living in a gentrified area, and especially, I think the thing I'm really sensitive to, and I'm getting him more sensitive to, is when people talk about schools. The coded language about schools. So I grew up in all Black neighborhoods. I went to all Black schools. They were not great, quote unquote, great schools. Like they didn't win any blue ribbons. And yeah, there were fights. And yeah, there were people who in gangs in the schools. I mean, whatever. Those were my schools. I don't know anything differently. And I did pretty well, all things considering, in my public, rundown public schools. But, his friends will say things like, well, we've got to move because we want our kids to go to good schools. And, some of them live in like where I used to live. And I'm like, what? I went to that school. You can't go to that school. And he's like, and they're like, oh no, I just want them to have the best chance. And this other school has all this programs. I'm like, no, let's just be honest. What do you mean when you say good school?
So you do call people out. Yeah.
What do you mean? And, he's obviously people in his life are white. So these are white people. And they basically don't want their kids to go to school with a bunch of Black kids. Now, yes, obviously education is important. There is this disgusting rhetoric in our culture that completely links the racial makeup of a school with its performance and with what it means to give your kids the best chance. And so you can get by using these words and be seen as like applauded as this great parent who just cares about their kids having the education. What you really are also doing at the exact same time is giving them a very whitewashed education.
And so those are the white people who have embodied bias and racism and they don't realize that they're speaking from it. That, I talk about this all the time, which is why I offer a class to white people to get a better understanding of what we hear and see when you think you're the quote unquote good white person. We still hear your bias and we still hear your racism. And what if you could hear it too? What would that shift in you? Because, there are plenty of white people out there that really want to do the right thing, be that person, but they say these things and we hear them and they don't even recognize it within themselves. So I guess my question is, with your husband, especially since his eyes have been opened more after George Floyd, is he more aware of two things? Does he call out those white friends, whoever people around him that say those kinds of things? Does he call them out where he might not have before? And does he recognize the bias, the privilege, perhaps the racism that lives inside of him that he's not paying attention to or hadn't paid attention to before?
So yes, he definitely calls people out way more than he did before. That's sure. And not just call them out, but he's been diving in and inviting the conversation. So
beautiful.
Yeah, not just waiting for, well, if it comes up, right? Because that's the privilege, right, of white people's lives. Well, if it comes up, I'll definitely be there and I will say the thing. And it's okay, well, guess what? The coming up of the topic is my day-to-day experience. So I don't have the luxury of just waiting for something.
Right.
And it's actively happening at every moment of the day. So he's definitely dived more in the conversation. And, I think when this, George Floyd was murdered, he was telling me, he's I'm so disappointed in some of the people in my life. They've been so silent. They haven't said to me. They know that I'm married to you. And there's some people who just haven't reached out at all, and he's I'm talking to them on text change about whatever fantasy football prep. And they're just pretending this isn't happening. And I don't know. He's I think I'm just going to poke the bear and just say, hey guys, what do you think about this? And so he started doing that in these different circles of friends and relatives as well. And I've known him for 10 years and I've never really seen him kind of go after a conflict like that. He's very non-confrontational person. He doesn't like fighting. He's just oh, let's just everybody be friends. I'm much more confrontational. The change I've seen is definitely him not being afraid to go into the conflict and having the hard conversation and going head to head with somebody and making it uncomfortable and being that's okay. It should be uncomfortable for you. It is a privilege for you to just sit here in this hypothetical conversation that we're having and experience your level of discomfort. What is that is nowhere near the discomfort that people face day to day on a day-to-day basis in this country and around the world. So he's been a lot better about that. And it's been really refreshing to me because I wasn't sure what his reaction was going to be. I knew he's supportive, but I've also in the past, I'll say it. He has some racist relatives and I'll tell them that I think they're racist. I will tell them to their faces. So this is not a secret. Whether they know they're racist or not, that's a totally different story. But anyway, we've had conversations in the past where he's oh, are you sure that's what you experience with this person? And I'm your cousin's a bigot. No. And I don't know which way to Sunday to slice it for you, but I'm telling you. And so he used to challenge me more on those things. And then after, I keep saying George Floyd or the summer, but it
was a demarcation. It was.
Yeah, there was definitely a before and after world. He just doesn't question anything. He's if you say, I'm not one, I can't question. It's it's not my place to question your interpretation, your experience of racism. It's I don't have enough experience to do it and I don't have to live it. And so if you say that person is being racist, then I default to you.
Mm-hmm.
Finally. What else can I get you to default to me on?
Yeah, right.
Since we're negotiating. Now, the big place that we've had deep conversations has been education, because it's something that I used to work. I worked in the education, public education industry for a while. And it's something that has, I was just sharing, like, it's just like the still accepted way of talking. And it's something that he and I had to have really long conversations with him about education in this country. And, he's from Beverly Hills. So
Mm-hmm.
he's not he didn't grow up like wealthy or anything, but he is from Beverly Hills.
Yeah, but Beverly Hills is an energy, a vibration, and environment. So yes. Mm-hmm.
It's very white vibration.
Yeah.
I know he's like, oh, but there were Persian kids at my school. I'm like, oh, come on. Like, yes, there were, but they're getting by as white too in some cases. So let's not.
White passing, yes.
They're white passing. So let's just call a spade a spade. But I would say to him, he was like, well, you wouldn't want to send your kids to school with gangs. I was like, okay, well, let me tell you this. There were gangs in my school. But there are gang members in my school. There aren't actually gangs in the school that I went to. Now, I know there's different levels of, schools, public schools. But I'll tell you, yes, of course there are gang members. But let me ask you this. How many kids at your schools did hard drugs, sold hard drugs, had underage drinking, crazy parties, did ridiculous things? Like, please tell me, at your rich white school, tell me how rampant those things were. And he's like, well, I'm like, no. See, this is my issue. This is why frat parties at UCLA never get raided, but there's a cop on every corner in Compton. Okay. So this is my problem, right? This is why Coachella never gets busted up for a drug raid. It's because these white people are doing white kids are doing the same stuff that Black kids are doing. They just aren't being policed about it. No one's using that language around it. And they're just being covered up. And I'm telling you, I'd rather my kids go to school with a bunch of poor Black and brown kids who don't have the money or the access to be doing whatever than a bunch of rich white kids who get away with everything because they have no accountability. And the greatest example of the lack of white accountability
happened yesterday.
No greater display.
Oh my God. Yes, absolutely. That's what every Black person is talking about.
So any case, that's the one that we keep going head to head on. He's like, so you would send your kids to the school you went to? I was like, you know what? Yes, I would, because I'd rather them get a good cultural education. You can make up whatever I missed in AP English. And in fact, I took AP classes and honor classes. You can get whatever kind of education you want to get. I can make that up. What I can't make up is any kind of trauma and racial targeting that they would get. That's going to be harder to rectify than, maybe some extra calculus classes. And that's my personal preference. Listen, I have Black friends who disagree with me too. They're like, nope, I wouldn't send my kid to our school. I'm like, well, I guess our kids won't be going to school together.
Does he understand better now when you have that conversation?
He does. He's starting to come around more. We have some friends who moved to a really kind of like a rural area, white friends, and in under the name of better schools. And it's like, we visited them and I don't know how they live there. They lived in the middle of LA and now they're living in the sticks so their kids could go to better schools. I was like, that's kind of extreme for better schools. Living hours away from family members, hours away from everybody you knew, just so you kids don't have to go to school with Black and brown kids. And they're, and both our friends are professionals. So I'm like, you can't make up the difference. It's that important to completely uproot your life? That's it. That's white flight, right? It pains me to see it because the fear is real and they're afraid of these things that they actually, neither of them really know that much about to be that fearful of. They've just seen it on TV and, whatever.
Are they willing to dive deeper? And again, since George Floyd, and people's eyes have been opened up and they realize that the things that we've been telling them for centuries now have always been true and continue to be true. We talk, during the election, we were talking about a Republican president or a Democratic president or the Congress or, I talk about diversity training. How many years has that been going on? Systemic racism is alive and well, and if we haven't seen it before, we saw it yesterday when they raided the Capitol, okay? If you didn't understand before, had those been, the picture of, there was a Black Lives Matter rally or whatever at the White House, and there were police lined up in gear for a Black Lives Matter rally. But you open the barricades to let white people raid. You let somebody steal Nancy Pelosi's mail? And walk out with it?
They take
selfies? So if you don't understand that there's something going on here in this country, if you didn't before, you know it now. So, and of course that was just yesterday, but my question is, these people who are your friends, and they are your friends, are their eyes opening up at all? Are they willing to dive deeper? Are they willing to look at, when they say things like that comes from a sense of bias and racism? Are they willing to look at that at all?
Maybe. Well, so then the card they like to play is like, you'll understand when you have kids, because we don't have kids, right? So they basically like completely cut our kneecaps off and like, you can't comment because you don't have kids. You don't know what it's like to care about somebody. And I'm like, I don't even know what that means. Right. Are they willing to have the conversation? I don't know. I think that's like the last frontier of the things that like white folks hold on to as like theirs, and hey, like I told you, I've had a very similar conversation with Black friends of mine who had the same argument. And because they were trying to move, they were like, oh, we might buy a house like where you grew up. I grew up in Pasadena, which is extremely segregated, by the way, in terms of education. Like, it's a very diverse community to live in. Because I played soccer, and you see kids from all backgrounds and walks of life. It's really great. But once you go to school, there are Black and Mexican schools, and then there are private schools, and those are white and probably like Asian, I would think. Maybe more Asian than they used to be. They were really white when I was growing up. But I had this long conversation with them. She's like, well, this is a Black couple with Black kids. They're very, quote unquote woke. They're like, well, we both went to private schools growing up in the East Coast, and we were, we got a great education, although like we were the only Black kids in our whole school. So it was really hard for us. But even with that said, we still worry about our kids, like academically. And I'm like, okay, I hope you worry about them emotionally, because those are, as we've seen by some people whose mental health is really shaky, these things, like, I just like in the name of academic excellence, we will fix everything. And it's like, our world, it doesn't work like that. Like, we are made up of so many other things. And there are kids who go up into junior college who go off and become CEOs and who don't go to Ivy League schools, and then there are kids who, went to Beverly Hills High School, had the greatest education, and don't end up doing nothing with their lives. Like, I've seen it all. And a lot of some of it has to do with academics. Some of it has to do with the emotional and psychological support that these kids have.
Which is really far more important. It's
so much fun.
I've raised kids, other people's kids, got a grandson. I can tell you it's far more important.
It lasts a lot friggin' longer. I'll tell you that. Those are the things. Listen, I can always learn calculus, like I said.
Yes.
How I see myself, how I feel about myself, I have to work like that. I could battle with every single day. And straightforward as like catch up on some math. So anyway, I know this isn't supposed to be about education, but I like
No, well, it's about the Black experience. So yes,
I like people to reflect when they really hard when they say good schools, bad schools, what that means, and what you're really willing to sacrifice in the quote unquote name of academic excellence.
Let me ask you this question, because I continue to say, and will never stop saying, again, demarcation line, George Floyd. The Black people that white people are facing since then are not the same Black people that they were facing before. We are unapologetically Black.
Mm-hmm.
What is your thought about that?
I agree with you.
In that we're speaking our voices, that, you know, environments where perhaps, you know, you talked about the incident that you had at work, and it might just be your personality, because it kind of was mine, that you would have spoken up anyway. But it's a different world now, where you're like, you know what, that's not correct. That's not fair. Yeah. I'm not standing for it. I'm going to attempt to do something about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's on big and small fronts. I think the harder ones are small fronts, right? Because it's the big times. Like, listen, when someone does something blatant to you, I mean, you're going to call it out.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the little, like, it's those microaggressions that you usually let slide so frequently, and they're so small, and you're like, oh, it would exhaust me to call out every single one of them. So I'm not going to do it. But now I do it every time. Yes. Like, I'm really sensitive to people using the terms ghetto, like super sensitive to it. And so I was walking with a friend the other day, and a white friend. And by the way, my husband and I have lots of different types of people in our lives. We have a lot of white people in our lives. We have a lot of Black people in our lives, a lot of Mexican people, a lot of Indian people. And so anyway, this white friend of mine who's really trying to be better, she said something. She's like, oh, I went all the way down to the ghetto or the hood or something. And I was like, please don't say that. Like, just say the neighborhood you went to. You don't have to say that. That's coded. And she's like, oh my gosh, you're so right. I'm sorry. And so I was like, yeah, it's fine. It just be more thoughtful. It's kind of like, it's something that it's a bad habit that we've allowed, you know, America has given white people a pass to just use these terms and be like, oh, well, you know what I meant. Like, no, I don't know.
I do know what you meant.
Yeah, the problem is I know what you meant. So why don't you just say what you intended and what you would rather say, which is like East Oakland or wherever. Just say the. So it's like those little things that I've called out. I've called them out, like on Instagram. Somebody said something about the hood, and I was like, can you not use that coded language? And I don't do it easily. That's the thing. Every time before I say it, I have this pit in my stomach, and I'm like, this is your moment. What are you going to do? You know, but I remember myself like, hey, a lot of America said that they would do better. And I remember they made this whole proclamation that they're all going to do better, and that when you see something, say something. So I'm just going to call them out. And I have yet to do it at work. I just, as much as people are like, oh, this is a safe space, it's still my place of my livelihood. And so I still don't feel necessarily safe in the work environment calling folks out, unless it's something blatant. Like, of course I would do it, but it's the microaggressions that I'm like. And the other problem,
give it a shot.
Yeah, I'll give it a shot. I think the other problem is sometimes I'm not even sure what it is. I'm like, what? I don't know why something smells racist. I just know it smells racist, and so I don't know how to give that person feedback unless I have to sit with it sometimes. Mm-hmm. Because it's so instinctual to me, and I'm like, that was racist, but gosh, I can't. How do I put this? I want to put it in a way that they will understand,
that they can accept it and maybe do something different.
Yeah, instead of being like, get out of here. This is a professional context. At home, I'm like, I'll just say like, I think that's not right, and I'll tell you why later.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So then, I guess on a final note, it is time for Black people to speak their voice, a voice that has been silent, in order to be accepted in a world that was the world of the dominant culture. And it is time for white people to step back and listen, which they're having a real difficult time with because they've never had to. but that's where we are.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Well,
You
I'm
don't,
glad you're doing your part.
you don't have the answers. And you have someone, and they have work to do. Like, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, these are the thing that gets me, Francesca, is that these people, and I'm speaking about the people in my life who obviously have work to do. These are people who I've seen do really hard things, like professional degrees and marathons and like things that are like physically and like mentally really challenging. They're not people who back away from fights, like they stood up for themselves. And it's like this space is something that they are so sensitive around. And it's like they don't be, it's still taking work to say like, it's okay that you're not an expert. You're never going to be an expert. Can you be okay with that? Like, and so anyway, it's just always interesting to me, the people who I know are like courageous and brave and strong and in all other aspects. And then when it comes to the topic of race, they just are kind of cowards. And I wish they would, that's the hope that I have for them, is that they would get over themselves and come from that same place of curiosity and beginner mindset that they had to have before they ran their first marathon and before they, took on a law degree and before they, built a whatever dentistry practice, making some of these things up. But I think that's the thing that always shocks me, is that these aren't people who back down from challenges, but that also know that they've been getting a pass for like their entire life.
Always. Mm-hmm.
This is it's coming at you now, but you've been living on easy street. So, and guess what? Even after you learn all this stuff, you still get to live on easy street because you still live in this country and you're still white. You still get to do all of those things. You just have to do a little bit more mental gymnastics because you've basically atrophied in this one area at the age of 4 or 0, whatever age it was. I just don't have a lot of sympathy.
That's so that your wording, your languaging of it all is absolutely. I love that they've atrophied in this area. Just the way you expressed it is absolutely perfect. And I hope that they can hear you. I hope that they can hear your upbringing, your background is very, very interesting, and who you are is such a well-rounded individual that has the ability to plant seeds in people. You live in a diverse world where you can drop seeds, and you're doing it. And Kalia, I'm so grateful. I'm grateful to know you. I can't wait till you get back to LA and I can say we can break bread together, have a glass of wine.
Yes, I would really love that. And thank you for what you're doing. It's really important, and it's hard. I mean, it's hard work. It's emotionally exhausting to do this. It's emotionally exhausting to be Black, one. So that's just like day-to-day basis. It just is tiring. I'm tired. But then to, kind of stay in the forefront of the conversation and, keep bringing people into it, Francesca, it's really hard. And
yes, it is.
It's not for the faint of heart. And so I applaud you for kind of not shying away. And I mean, I hope there's a great book called Black Futures that just came out by these two women. One of them is an activist, Kimberly Drew, and one of them, she's also an activist, but she's a writer and a podcaster named Jenna Wortham. And it's all kind of about what does it mean to be Black in America now?
I have to look for this.
And what's the narrative? It's a beautiful, beautiful, well illustrated book as well. So it's a great coffee table piece. But one of the things that they were saying, I listened to an interview with them, is that it's just really important to rest and to take care of yourself as a Black person right now, because the whole world is still, it's not going anywhere. So I say that to myself. You, it's the rest part is important.
So important. I take deep breaths very often.
Yeah. We are very balanced and you meditate. But I think that that's something that can't be overlooked because especially, in the Black community, mental health is such a overlooked
Yes.
area. And so that's something else that I'm really passionate about is recharging and refueling and making space for ourselves. If we are the lucky Black people, who actually have the privilege to do that, because so many our brothers and sisters just can never do it. Take advantage of our rest. So
yes,
rest as resistance.
What did you say?
Rest as resistance.
Yeah, rest as resistance. I love it. Very good. Kalia, please say hello to Joe for me.
I will.
Yes, her husband is an amazing man. I've met him and spent time around him. So yes, I adore him as well. It's been such a pleasure to have you because we need each other. What you have within yourself and what you give, the world needs it. And thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you for listening and for allowing me to be here and share a little bit of my story. And I really appreciate it. And please say hi to your daughters.
I shall.
And let's keep the conversation going.
All right.